Okay, well, welcome everyone to our third webinar for the NPF 14 LMD, the National Project for Learners and Mobile Devices. This is our hangout with Catherine Cronin, all the way from Galway in Ireland, and it's just after 8:30 in the evening there. Nice cold autumn day down there. So welcome to Catherine, and it's great to have you here. Catherine lectures in IT and related fields at the University in Galway, and is doing a PhD in open and connected education. So I'm not sure what the exact thesis topic is, but I'll hand it over to Catherine, and she'll talk a bit about open education, and then we can ask some questions. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, thanks very much, Tom, and Adrian and Vikil for being here. Yeah, my interest, I suppose, has grown in the whole area of open education through my practice for the last number of years. As an open educator, I definitely identify as an open educator or networked scholar, whatever you want to call it. And it was through my experiences as an open educator and kind of working with my students on the open web that I met Tom, actually, because the work that I was doing with my students was very visible, and I connected with Tom and a number of other educators, and then we got together in a community of practice called iColab, which Vikil knows about. I'm not sure if Adrian is familiar with. It had started a couple of years before I joined, but it's grown in the last number of years. So I'll talk about that, I suppose. But after my initial chat with Tom, I thought what I might do is just share some of my ideas just about openness and why I feel it's such an important value as an educator in higher education, and then I'd really love to just have a chat after that. So is it okay if I share my desktop and just go through a couple of slides? Would that be okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, that's great. Let me see. I think I'll start here. Now, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. That's great.
All right, that's great. This is a train station in Oranmore, which is right outside Galway, and Adrian might know this place, and I just absolutely love it. It's just what the words say under that yellow line are "Stay behind the line," and the platform just goes out into vast openness. So I think it's a lovely image, but. In terms of openness, my definition of openness is to try and use open resources as much as possible in my teaching, to create and share what I'm doing, both in terms of my teaching and my thinking and my research, and to help my students to do those things as well in a gradual way. So I suppose over the last number of years, I've moved from someone who's been very focused on open content and open licensing to someone who would embody, I'd say, a spirit of openness, or really an attitude about openness. And that doesn't happen by turning a switch. It was through these practices of using open resources, creating them, understanding Creative Commons licenses, and helping students to do those things. And then becoming, as I said, someone who identifies as an open educator. I think you had Alan Levine with you last week. Is that right, Tom? Or a couple of weeks ago? So
Yeah,
I'm borrowing
2 weeks ago, yes.
2 weeks ago.
Actually, he used your presentation as well.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I mentioned in a blog post comment to Alan about 2 or 3 weeks ago that I don't think I've ever done a presentation without one of his images, because his images are just evocative and really speak to me, and he has a lot of images around openness, and this is just one of many, as well as being a beautiful photograph. I think a lot of his photographs are great metaphors. And one of the things that I spoke about in Alt, Tom, which you'll remember, is something I've started thinking about recently, which is I feel very much that openness is about humility, because this was something I first read about in Cameron Nealon's blog, because we have no idea who will use what we share, or how they'll use it, or where they'll use it, whether they'll use it in ways that we were thinking about or not. So it's actually quite humbling because sometimes you'll find out about those uses and sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get feedback, which may be positive or maybe not, and might be pushing back. Whereas some of the feedback that I get from my colleagues who are not sharing their work openly is they see openness as perhaps a form of hubris, and they say, oh, you've built up a great brand for yourself, or isn't it great that you have time to blog? So I think that's something probably worth keeping in mind for us as open educators, is that what we feel about our open practices might not be what it looks like to other people, but that can be a good entry point to some interesting discussions. And then this quote by Joy Ito is just one of my favorites. I would say this really is the essence of what I feel education is at the moment. Not centralized instruction, but establishing oneself as a node in a broad network of distributed creativity. And all of what I do, I would say, as an educator, is to help my students to try and live and thrive in that world where they're becoming nodes in a broad network of distributed creativity. So I'm quite inspired by this quote and this whole attitude. And the whole notion of navigating the marvelous, I'll share with you, and then I'll maybe show a few examples. And that is, I've become aware that for our students, there is very much a divide between formal and informal learning. And the way students often experience this is as a form of dissonance. So if you like, the students are learning as we do in ways that are very connected in the network, in informal ways. That, they search, they connect, these very open and everyday ways of connecting and learning about things from Wikipedia onwards. However, when students come into universities and third-level institutions, we present them with very formal, bounded institutional systems. So students every day have to navigate this dissonance about where they can learn and what they can reveal, for example, to us as their lecturers. And I've used a lot of material recently from the Visitors and Residents Project, which you're all probably well aware of. But recent work done by Dave White and Donna Lonclo and others has shown, this is a long quote, but I think it's quite good. They identify something called the learning black market. And they're saying, yeah, of course, students are using Google and Wikipedia and all these other things, but they believe that we think that these are not suitable sources. So they don't reveal that to us. So they might use a Wikipedia article, scan down to a couple of the references at the end, put those in their list of references at the end of their report or their essay or whatever it might be, thereby not having an open communication process with us about how they're learning or where they're learning or what the suitability of Wikipedia is, but really missing a great learning opportunity for all of us, to talk about legitimate information-seeking practices. I'd like to show this video. Tom, do you have any problem with me sharing a video for a minute? I hope that you can still hear me.
Yeah, that should be fine. Hopefully the connection's up to it, so we'll see.
Okay, it's only 1 minute long, so bear with me, please.
Sure.
It's just that this short video, which Tom has seen before, it is the explanation about why you've been using the title "Navigating the Marvelous," and it's a very short poem by Seamus Heaney in a series of poems called Lightnings, and the poem is based on an Irish legend where Irish monks at a monastery in Clonmacnoise, and again, Adrian, I don't know if you made it there. It's not too far from Galway, about an hour from Galway, and there's this ancient legend that the monks at this monastery saw a ship sailing in the sky above them, and they were completely shocked. And the anchor line of the ship got caught at the monastery, and then the monks had to help release the ship. So I'll just play the short video. It's only just over a minute. And then move on from there.
Okay. The annals say, when the monks of Clonmacnoise were all at prayers inside the oratory, a ship appeared above them in the air. The anchor dragged along behind so deep it hooked itself into the altar rail. And then, as the big hull rocked to a standstill, a crewman shinned and grappled down the rope, its struggled to release it, but in vain. This man can't bear our life here, and will drown, the abbot said, unless we help him. So they did. The freed ship sailed, and the man climbed back out of the marvelous as he had known.
Okay, I hope that played for you. And this phrase, out of the marvelous, has become very associated with Seamus Heaney. It's a lovely expression. And the way that he uses that term, marvelous, is to refer to something that's extraordinary, kind of out of this world. And I think one of the powerful metaphors of this poem is that there are at least two realities. And the reality that we're in becomes the air that we breathe. It's hard for us to describe it. It's just normal to us. It's the everyday. It's as I said, it's the air that we breathe. And people who are from another reality, who visit us or come into our spaces, may experience that reality as very strange, marvelous, and may feel that they cannot breathe in that space, just as the crewmen coming down to that monastery did. And I believe that because of students coming into higher education who experience this dissonance between informal and informal learning, many of them may experience higher education as a place where they can't breathe or certainly can't flourish, because there is this divide between formal and informal learning. Excuse me. And so our task, I suggest, is not only rather to support learning, but to support networked learning with our students, and that is through open practices, mobile learning, as you're doing in your project, and to help students to bring their multifaceted skills and networks and identities into learning spaces that we might create together, and that may even be not only open spaces, but places out with the university completely. And this is certainly what mobile learning enables us to do. So, some of you might be familiar with this image that's on the screen. Alec Couros came up with this about 8 years ago, this whole concept of the networked teacher, and talking about how the role of teachers is changing, in our networked society. And in my research, I'm looking at the three types of spaces where networked educators and networked students meet. So we're all networked individuals. We all learn informally in networks, but where do we meet in higher education? And in physical spaces like classrooms and bounded online spaces, if they are members-only learning management systems, we cannot share those networks and identities that we've developed in other spaces. But if we have open online spaces, even if those are only part of the courses that we teach. We may teach in classrooms and have, class materials on Moodle, but if we have learning opportunities in open spaces, then we can share what we're doing inside the classroom out to our networks, and we can bring other people and other resources from outside in to our learning. And certainly, we can help our students to develop some really essential practices and digital literacies when we do that. But I think we can also help them develop important identities, and we can model some different identities. So I find that students often bring in confident online social identities, but they might not have confident identities as scholars or learners or researchers or professionals. So when they mix with us and with others, authors of papers that we're reading or other educators in other countries, we have the chance to kind of model some of those practices, and students can experience those. So that's kind of the iCollab community. Tom is there, and I'm there, and a number of other people in different countries. This is where we're scattered around the world, and we found each other just as people who were teaching in open spaces with our students. And I suppose the last point, because I don't want to take too long doing this, is the most powerful thing, I suppose, about connecting with other educators the way we're doing now and the way we've done in the iCollab network is that our small learning communities that we have with our students can become nodes in the network. So I think it's very easy to say to students, oh yeah, you can just get on Twitter and you can connect with anybody, and it's all out there. You can be a node in the network, but we can be much more effective at teaching and showing students different ways to do that by bringing our learning communities into those networks as nodes, using our course hashtags or community hashtags, and as I said, thereby practicing and demonstrating some of those important open, mobile, networked learning practices. So I think I might pop out of the PowerPoint presentation now and then have a chat with you all.
Well, thank you, Catherine. That was great. And I tweeted the link to the Vimeo video. Hopefully I got the link right.
Okay.
So using the NPF 14 LMD hashtag.
Yes. I'm not sure if that metaphor is meaningful for people, but I think it's quite an unusual expression to say navigating the marvelous. But I was very inspired by Seamus Heaney in that way, and I'd be interested to know if anyone else, what people take from that.
Yeah, and I like the cultural link. Obviously, it's something significant for Ireland as well. It's great to share that. Do you want to unmute your microphone, Adrian, if you've got any questions? So let's just throw it open for a bit of discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that, Catherine. I think I'm working with pre-service teachers and lecturers who teach pre-service teachers at the moment, and those questions around identity and the boundaries between, like, we've got campus-based learning, we've got school-based learning, and we've got groups which have to be private in school, and then groups that can be open outside of school. And we're in this project, we're constantly navigating all those boundaries and levels of openness and privacy, and in that we're trying to, the students are building their identities as teachers and learning to become teachers, and so all those things really are really relevant to what we're doing, I think. One question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh,
no, go ahead.
One question I was going to ask you about was about, I come across quite a bit of fear about being open. If I put myself out there, people will see what I'm doing and maybe critical, and how do you sort of overcome that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and obviously something I've come across as well. And to be perfectly honest, there are some good reasons to be fearful, because networks are not all warm, cuddly places all the time. And I think we do have to be honest that sometimes there is negative feedback and blowback, and some people experience harassment. So I think we can't deny those things. However, it's a balance. And networks and the internet specifically amplifies things that happen, in embodied systems, in education systems and in other publics. So the in instances of harassment and negative behavior are not unique to the internet. So yes, we do need to be aware of that. But it's important, I think, to really have a discussion with students about their identities. Rather than extolling all the virtues of online communication and jumping in there, let's talk about what some of the issues are and talk about privacy and identity. And I've found that most students are more comfortable with creating perhaps a disposable or more cloaked identity initially, so they don't have to tweet with their face as their avatar and their real name. Some students are more comfortable maybe creating a Twitter account with a pseudonym and another avatar, just to practice in the shallows, to mess around, and I call it to kick the tires. Let's see what this place does. And then when they gain some confidence, they may grow to tweet in their own name, or maybe blog in their own name. But a lot of the introductory material around social media and Twitter in particular, I think focuses on the mechanics, like how do you tweet and how do you use hashtags and so on. Whereas I think what holds most people back is precisely what you were talking about, is what is my voice? Who am I, not only who am I connected with, but who am I speaking as? You know, I might have this confident social identity, but I don't know if I feel confident enough as an almost teacher to tweet. So I think these creating relatively safe spaces in our learning communities where we go onto the network together and have conversations with other learning communities, I think that's the key, because I've found that those kinds of experiences help students to develop the confidence, but also having open discussions about identity, privacy, authenticity, you know, how to protect your data. That's not glossing over those things, but really addressing them head on is really important.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, just from our experience as well, that being open is about building up levels of trust as well. So you're not open with everyone. You're open with a group of people that you identify with, that you are in similar types of roles, are interested in similar types of things, and that you trust as well. And then you become open in the fact that you then allow other people on the sideline, on the periphery, to be able to participate if they want to, if they choose. But it's about, I suppose, building up that trust. And in some cases it's mediated trust. So for us in iColab, you know, it was a small group of people working together that had met each other at conferences overseas, etc., and then started working together virtually. And then they started inviting people they knew along. So I'd never met Catherine before, but she was invited by Helen Keegan, who I hadn't met. And so it's that mediated trust as well, that sense of trust. And I think we do the same thing with our students. We mediate trust because if we're working with people that we trust, we're then mediating that trust to our students. So I think that's really important. Any other questions or thoughts?
Well, I had something.
Go, James.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Apologies, I only got my invite partway through. Something must have gone wrong in the world of Google. But I really enjoyed the part that I did get to see. And I particularly liked the point you had about how even having an open space, even if it's not everything that's open, so even if you have a Moodle LMS, yet you also have an open avenue, it makes a difference. And I thought that seems like a really good starting point for some of the people who are you know, less adventurous, I guess the middle. So you've got a lot of academics who are adventurous with this sort of thing, but then you've got a much bigger body who aren't. So do you find that that's actually quite a good stepping stone for people to get started, and then they perhaps grow from there? Or
Definitely. I mean, it certainly was in my own practice, but I realized when I was chatting with different people as individuals or groups about open education and open practices, that a lot of people said, you know, well, I'm not going to offer a MOOC. You know, I just teach my normal class. And I realized that it is really about, you know, discrete, purposeful learning activities where you do things in the open, because there may be great reasons for not doing everything in the open. Often there are. But, you know, Tom was invited into our class via Google Hangout to explore Wikitude and Google Maps. You know, and in that iColab network, we visited one another's classrooms, you know, students and lecturers. We had Twitter chats with various people, sometimes authors of papers that we were reading. And it can be a very small half-hour activity like that really explodes students' ideas about what Twitter can be, what learning in the open can be, and so on. It doesn't have to be, you know, a whole open course.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found it's very powerful.
Great.
Cool. Well, we've probably got time for one more question. So, Vikal, did you have one?
Yeah. Kirsten, my question is, have you found any strategies that work in terms of getting students to engage with the network?
Yes. So students engaging on their own?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is that... are you thinking of an example where that hasn't happened, or just trying to understand more about the question?
Yeah, so in my case, like I was running a project with a group of journalism students. So
Yes.
of course they are on Twitter, but the problem we had was they wouldn't actually engage with the network unless we asked them to. So one of the things I found that really helped them make that change in mindset was once we explained why we were doing it, and not just that, they needed to see the point beyond the course. They needed to see a point of why they should continue with this for their lifetime, or at least till they have made it, or something like that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, and yeah, it's kind of making those connections, and I think that's all around the design of the learning activity. Because if it's just a tick the box kind of thing, then it's not that meaningful, and it won't lead to connections. So certainly the using networks like iColab, where there are identifiable people. So for example, like Tom would comment on my students' videos or their blogs. So over time, and then they would see him on Twitter. You know, so again, it was developing that trust with a number of people at other institutions. A second level was connecting students peer-to-peer. So my students connected with Helen's students and shared some work, and that certainly made a difference for some of my students. And the third thing I did once, but which I'll definitely do again, was I asked students as part of their reflection on social media and network learning at the end of the term to just find one person online. In all of the reading lists for my course, I give the Twitter handle for every author or video that's made by anybody, so that the students can connect on Twitter. So I asked them to connect with to look at one of those people or another person, and kind of look at their activity on Twitter over a week, and comment on it. And those were really revealing. So someone looked at Dana Boyd and Jeff Jarvis. Educators, and I thought that was a really interesting learning experience for students, because they chose the person to follow, and then commented on, you know, whether they tweeted a lot or a little, or whether they tweeted about personal things or not, and what they thought about that. So it really provoked a lot of ideas around privacy and intimacy and that leveling between students and educators.
Oh, that's awesome. I will try that one, the last one. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I think that's really powerful, is that whole idea of you know, virtual mentoring, I suppose, in some ways, you know, following people that are experts in the field and seeing how they approach different activities is one way to learn.
Yeah.
Hey, well, thank you, Catherine. That's our time for today, and it's been great to have you interact with the project here, and it'll be archived so anyone can watch it when they like to later. So thank you very much, and we'll stop the broadcast now.
Thank you all, and really nice chatting with all of you. I've enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Good night. Good night. Okay, bye.
See ya.